For the past few months, I've been working on a podcast called EventStars to help people in the events industry, and I've had some really fantastic opportunities to interview some superb people from the industry and beyond. But like many things at the moment, now is not the time to launch it. Now is the time where we need to come together and support each other for what is going to be truly difficult times ahead. So I've been switching it up a little bit while my business is pretty much at zero, and decided to do a podcast that can help people cut through the noise and help businesses hopefully grow and learn during this period. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that something good can come from it. If you've got any suggestions, then feel free to get in touch. Listed among the 100 most influential in UK-India relationships, Darshita Gillies is the founder and CEO of Maanch. Her aim is to leverage the power of emerging technologies to address the complex business and societal challenges we face in a more sustainable, conscious and strategic way. Her experience builds on and blends three facets: finance, technology and planetary sustainability. With a professional background as a chartered accountant, investment banker, executive coach, impact investing and in fintech and blockchain, Darshita also serves on boards for both for and non-for-profit organisations. The platform she's founded is called Maanch, and it's an award-winning global impact platform transforming the way millions of people engage with philanthropy and impact investing worldwide. Maanch aims to influence the flow of funds towards global sustainable development by providing technology, data and insights on social, environmental and economic impact. In this podcast, we spoke about her journey coming from a very humble background in Mumbai, where she told me that once the milkman had to pay for her school fees, to speaking at the UN, the Vatican and doing a TED Talk. We also spoke about how she put together such a complex project in Maanch and the steps she took to do it. And I think that would be great learning for anyone who's looking to start a business, and how philanthropy and the art of giving is changing. I have to say, I really enjoyed this conversation because although this podcast is about opportunity in crisis, and naturally a lot of people might look at that as opportunities for themselves and their businesses, Darshita got me to think a lot more about success in terms of creating opportunities for others. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Enjoy! Darshita, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. When I was first introduced to you and started doing some reading up on yourself and your projects, one of the things that stuck out to me was that you said that you are a global citizen. What do you mean by that?
Thank you. I mean so many things by it, but simply put, I feel like I've lived so many lifetimes in this one life that I don't associate myself through national boundaries. And that's what I mean by that. I was born and raised in Mumbai in India, and then I've lived in Indonesia, in UK, but traveled in Azores in the middle of the Atlantic. Traveled pretty much every continent. My husband is from South Africa. So I feel like these national boundaries that we've drawn served us at a particular point in time. And I feel I associate myself more as a world body rather than country body.
I think it's so poignant right now as well, because obviously everything that's going on with this coronavirus, that despite sometimes the way that the media likes to separate us, we're actually we all have the same problems when it comes down to it. We all have the same needs and we have the same basic wants in life, and that's why I think it really was poignant. But you said that you're originally from Mumbai, so how did you end up in London?
Yeah, I think it's a long story. I would say from childhood, I always dreamed one day I would go to London. And I didn't know how. I come from a very humble house. We grew up with very little. My brother, sister, and I, we shared the same bed until I was 24 when I left home. There were days at home where we didn't have money to buy food, or we didn't have money to pay for our school fees. We were massively supported by society, and India has a very intricate social system. Even the milkman, if when we needed money to pay school fees, he would just come and give us the extra money, so the next day we could pay school fees. So I just wanted to highlight, like, that at that time, when you have such little and you dream so big, you don't know how you're going to get there. But I think it's that spirit of really wanting to figure out how do we get somewhere where we don't know how to get has kept me going. And long story swift, I studied to be a chartered accountant. I was amongst the top 50 in the country. And I worked with Standard Chartered Bank, British bank, but the biggest foreign bank in India. And that opened up a whole new world of opportunities. And we lived and worked in Indonesia. I met my husband at the bank, and we lived and worked in Indonesia. And when I was pregnant, we both decided, if we want as parents to be bold and take risks, and that's what we want our child to learn from us, how do we role model that? And we both decided to quit. In person, I love banking. I'm not one of those who says, oh, that I didn't like it, it took my soul away. I'm not one of those persons. I really loved what I did. I loved the bank. I loved the values, the culture, the ethos. For me, it was more a question of what more can I do with my life? And if I've mastered this and I've reached the height of my career in a banking context, what other heights can I reach? And so that's what's inspired me to keep going. And so, yeah, after Stanchart, we decided to quit banking and come to London and start a new life here.
Excellent. And you said that sometimes you couldn't pay your school fees, but then you ended up being one of the top 50 accountants in India. I mean, how does somebody make that jump from not being able to pay for their school fees to getting to that top 50 status? Okay, hard work is one of them, but there must have been a number of steps that you took to get there, or was it a big vision that you had?
Yeah, I think in part it's, I would say the primary program at that point in time that was running me was, how do we get out of the situation? And the best way to get out from there was to study and do well and get a good job. And to study and do well meant that I had to find out what would be the highest paying job I could get if I could study in the least possible amount of time. And I identified chartered accountancy because at that time, we could still pursue CA, chartered accountancy, alongside with graduation. So when I was 21, I graduated, and 22, I was a chartered accountant with a master's, and that set me up for success. Another personal story: when I was writing the exam, the day before the exam, we had not paid electricity bill for 3 months, so the electricity guys came and took the lights off, and I sat there that night saying, I'm not going to cry today. 100,000 students are writing this exam tomorrow. And today, if I sit and cry and make myself, take myself down the victimhood of why me and why this and why not, then I minimize my chance of success. And I feel sometimes they say the greater the struggle, the sweeter the victory. It has been in that way. And I think on a more personal note also, I feel a lot of support from the family around me. In India, especially for women, the focus is not so much on studying. The focus is on learning how to cook or learning how to be a nice wife. And it's okay if you don't perform so well. Whereas in my family, they really supported me in my education. They said, if you do this well, we'll support you in every way. So I felt incredibly supported by my cousin in Canada. She sold her wedding dress to pay the fees I needed for my coaching. So I feel like I was incredibly held. And I feel that trust of people in wanting me to succeed powered me to go and get there. One cannot achieve one thing by oneself. So
definitely. And you said about the community. I mean, Mumbai, I mean, how many citizens are in Mumbai? I can't remember. Is it like
20 million.
20 million? And you
In a city, yes.
in a city which is crazy. And I mean, I've been to Mumbai and I know how densely populated it is, and I would never imagine that people have these relationships with each other on such a level that a milkman would even want to pay for your school fees when he realized you couldn't pay.
Yeah, it's incredible how when societies allow for that human connection to flourish, support always exists. And financial is just one support. I think as human beings we require support on many levels, and I feel that in India in that way has kept that and supported and enabled and kept that culture alive of the relationship with the task.
Brilliant. And I'm just reading here about like some of your career highlights. You mentioned chartered accountant, investment banking, executive coach, impact investing and fintech blockchain specialist, and now you've set up a global impact platform called Maanch. I mean, am I pronouncing that right first of all?
Yes, Maanch platform in Hindi. And
why the pivot? I mean, and how does someone even make a pivot into that?
Yeah, I would say my life has been a constant pursuit of asking a question: what is my life purpose, and what do I want? What difference do I want to make, and how do I make it happen? And banking was one of those where I reached the heights and I felt, okay, this is great, but I feel I can do a lot more. It's not stretching me enough. I felt like leadership development was the next thing to do, because if I could influence a lot of leaders in a lot of organizations, then a lot of organizations will make a lot of good decisions. And that led me to realize that actually organizational change is a very small lever of change. We need to bring multiple stakeholders together to make this happen. And so I started incubating companies and consulting with large organizations to explore how we can bring multiple stakeholders around the same table and work together on projects that are of importance to all of us, not just one of us or some of us. And then a couple years ago, I found myself at the United Nations. I was speaking with the heads of countries, and it was also the time when the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were announced.
Sorry. Before you go on, how does one find themselves suddenly at the United Nations?
Well, I feel I always, as I said, I always stretch the boundaries of what I can do and what I must do. And in 2014, my husband and I, we started a company called Blue Dot Advisory. And this was born from that insight that organizational change is not going to move the needle. We need to go a little bit more higher. We need to look at systems and how do we engage governments, businesses, nonprofits. And that allowed me to put myself out into organizations that would not have given me access if I just said I want to coach your executives. I came in with a different intention. I came in with a different question. And these kind of conversations led for many doors opening. I did a TED talk at St. Andrews University on millennial power and how young people need to be part of making that future happen. And the TED talk led me to speak with head of one of the United Nations coordinators on how to engage youth. And through that, I think the question became much broader. Youth is obviously one important element that needs to be a key driver in enabling sustainability, but there are many other drivers. Finance is among one of them. And finance is where I feel we make decisions at the moment still on a very skewed or a narrow metric of what money buys us. We do know that when we buy something cheap, it's not cheap really. It costs a lot to produce that cheap product. It costs a lot of exploited labor. It costs a lot of planetary resources that will take a long time to regenerate. But just because it comes to us in a palatable form and we can buy a t-shirt or a pair of jeans for £20 and we think it's cheap, we've continued an economy, but we've sort of run an economy, we've depleted the underlying asset, and we've called it income. and that's how I think of it as an accountant. So for me, it's very important to bring other layers of information into the financial metric. And one way in which I can see doing that is bringing the power of technology and bringing the data around sustainability into the world of finance.
Okay, so the platform itself, Maanch, from what I understand, you're just removing barriers basically from people, say, living in London to be able to make a difference in India or even like closer to home as well, if they want to help somebody.
Yeah. And, if I just sort of join the dots, if I just look at money, there are three ways in which we use money in society. One is money we give as donations or as presents or as gifts, money that we invest in to create more wealth, and money that we spend to buy goods and services. And with Maanch, we've started our journey with the money that we give. How can we make sure that the money that we give has the opportunity for highest impact? How can we spend that £1 or £5 or £50 or £5 million in a way that we can see that this is what it buys in terms of impact, and this is how all our dots join up, and this is how we are actually collectively moving our human activity towards a more sustainable future. And that's what the Maanch machinery is about. It's about joining the dots and bringing more transparency into a sector that has not necessarily been ideal, not necessarily been transparent. And I feel that the more transparency comes into the sector, more people will be inspired to give more.
You mean the charity sector hasn't exactly been transparent?
I would say charity sector is small. I would say worldwide philanthropy sector, and it includes charities, it includes businesses that give, it includes governments that give. There is a whole machinery of giving and receiving that needs to be taken into account. And as a platform, what we want to do is provide technology interfaces that allow the sector to interact with tech in a way that's friendly for them, but the intelligence of the system allows us to join the dots and see how the whole is actually moving us forward.
So imagine like somebody's listening to this podcast now and they haven't seen the platform. I've seen it. How would you explain it in sort of the most basic terms that the platform works?
Yeah. Well, in a couple of days, actually, the global platform for COVID responses goes live. And so everyone will be able to go online and actually see it. I'm very happy to share a screenshot later on so you can have a look at it as well. But the idea is really there are people and organizations that work on different things. And some of them are COVID related, but some of them are impacted by COVID. And what the platform does is allows for anyone anywhere to put up a project and say, I'm working on this. It means on the map, just like you see a COVID map with all the cases of people living and dying, on the map there are these dots that will show up, that will show all the projects that we are working on. Once they get verified that they are actually credible projects, they become verified projects. So it's very easy to distinguish projects that exist and projects that are verified, and the projects that are funded, whether by the fund that we have set up, or funded by the government, or funded by any other foundation or any other organization. And all of this technology is being made available for free. And what that will mean for us all is that we will be able to see in one dashboard or one snapshot what help is needed during this time, how much help is needed, and who has already been helped, so we can see what the gaps are. And with that transparency, it becomes very easy for someone to say, okay, if I gave £10, I know it's going to that gap, and that gap really matters to me. At this point in time, when we give to online platforms or any other organizations, it's not very clear as to where it goes. And that's what we want to enable. We want people to be able to see where their money goes, what impact it has, and the difference it makes. And that will inspire more giving.
And with COVID as an example, a gap might be hospital equipment or ventilators.
Yes, I think gaps are, I would say, are broad. So one, I would like to draw distinction. There is an immediate need. A lot of organizations need immediate support. Hospitals need support. NHS staff need meals. There is also need for equipment. There's also need for support for elderly people, support for childcare, support for food banks. So there are a lot of topics. We've identified about 14 areas that are directly impacted by COVID and need support now. That said, in the UK, at least, we have a fairly good distribution system. In Asia and Africa, that may not be the case. And so we want to bring visibility to the needs in some of these developing countries as well. And then the important thing to remember is we can already start to see that the economy is going to shrink. There may be a depression that's coming. So we need to make sure that the monies we have, we don't just spend now, we also allocate money towards how we build that future. It's not just about I need it now and then we don't have anything for how we're going to recreate society. And so I feel, coming to the topic of opportunity in isolation, we have an amazing opportunity to rethink how we give money, how we spend it, and how we invest it. And this opportunity allows us to come from the inspiration of what did we learn from isolation? What are really our human needs? Do we really need to have some of the businesses that have previously existed if we can live a happy, healthy life like this in isolation?
And I think
opportunities for connection and how do we? So I feel I'm in a creative space, which is really asking some very basic questions. What does the next era of human society look like?
Definitely, I think the world is going to change a lot after this, and we are going to realize that a lot of the things that we thought we needed, we might not need. But then again, we might all go back and, start using those things that we want rather than those things that we need all over again. So I think it's an open-ended question, but I think the world will change in some way. And you mentioned about verification of the projects, because I think that is something that is really important, especially people who are giving money. How do you ensure the projects that are being funded or about to be funded are thoroughly checked and are the right type of projects for your platform?
Yeah. So firstly, in terms of rightness or wrongness, we actually don't have a filter. We want to be guided by the communities in terms of what support they need. So we don't screen out anything that comes in. There is a very intelligent mechanism. It's a very simple form, and that allows us to, not just for us, but also for them to see where they stand with regards to what they want to do. With all that mapping, we'll also be able to see how many similar projects exist in an area, so we might be able to influence collaboration on the ground. So in terms of projects, the idea is really to allow for everything to come through so we can find how coordination can work. In terms of due diligence of organizations, we do 3-tier of due diligence. We check them, organizations themselves, that they are registered or within the jurisdictions they are registered. We also do financial due diligence. We don't take money in our account. We actually pass it directly to the charities. So they have to set up a payment integration where they go through a KYC AML check. And thirdly, we do an impact due diligence as well to ensure that the need is really needed and the kind of costs that are being allocated for the kind of activities match up, and that indeed these are some of the best ways in which that project can have an influence in that society or in that community. So those are a few checks. In terms of verification then, as we know, we can, when we start raising money for something, we can only predict I'm going to have so-and-so impact, but actuality is always different from what we project. So we want to break that impact down into 2-3 phases. One is what they promise they will do. Second is what they actually did. And the third is evaluation. Did it really make a difference? And not then going back to the organizations that they were wrong or they shouldn't. It's a constant learning process, and that learning together is going to give us better answers. And sometimes we need to invest in failure so that we can invest in success. So that's how I see it. In terms of on-ground verification, next week we will be announcing a partnership with an amazing organization called Proof of Impact. They work with grassroots organizations to with digital interfaces that can allow people to literally say they have received the benefit. So we will be able to join the dots, not just from I supported this organization, we'll be able to join the dots from the beneficiaries as well. We actually received the support. And the dashboard will allow for a little mini report on each project that's funded in terms of how beneficiaries actually receive that support and how they're better off.
What are some of the steps that you took to create the platform? Because a project like this, it isn't something you just sit there in your bedroom, you think it up, and then tomorrow it starts. I mean, finding investors, finding projects, finding a team. I mean, what are some of the steps that you took?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think to achieve an impossible task, you have to break it down into possible steps. And that was the first thing I did. Before I started anything, I knew technology was going to be core. So I went to Mumbai and I spoke to a couple of teams in Mumbai. And I spoke to 3 teams. I gave them the same task. I want you to build me the first prototype of this idea. After a month, one team delivered an impeccable design that I came back to London and I showed to 70 different stakeholders here. And I asked them, do you think it's worthwhile starting something like this? And they all said, yes, it was unanimous. We need this. And that's what inspired me to start the company. I registered the company. The team that built for me, I asked them to leave their jobs and start a new company in Mumbai so that they could work 100% just on delivering this this project for Maanch.
So you poached the developers from their existing companies?
Yeah. And it was fortunate. It was my brother, so I could. And India, in Western countries, sometimes there's a notion that if it's your brother or sister, maybe you don't want to associate. Whereas in India, I feel like if you want to work with an Indian company, trust is key, especially if you're working from a distance. And having lived with my brother and sister in the same bed for 24 years, I know I can trust them with anything and everything. And so I know that I'm going to have very good tech that I can trust. So yeah, he got his whole tech team with him and started the company. And they've grown as well from 3 of them working on Maanch to now 14 of them working on different aspects of Maanch, including design. And here on this side, I obviously, like you said, you can't do this alone. For me, it's been very organic. I have not gone with a job description. I want someone. I've really gone with the energy of people I've met. And when our visions have aligned, I've made them an offer to work with Maanch in a way that is fulfilling for them as well and gets us to where we want to go collectively. We also have an amazing advisory board. It's very diverse. And this is a good way for startups to get very experienced insights without needing to have senior executives working all the time. If you have a good team that is versatile, especially as a startup, it's very valuable to have someone with experience giving you very precise steps on aspects that need to be built, but then a team that can actually take those insights and do something about it is key.
And were these existing connections that you had?
Not all of them. Obviously, it starts with existing connections, but then it's been very, very much about who is the best in the industry, or if I need help with social media, who can I speak with? And it's generally asking 5-10 people, and then they give you insights on who you can speak, and that leads you to the right person. And I think for me, there's definitely an element of alignment with the vision. It's an underlying principle. If there is an alignment, I find that we can do work, but then it's not a long-term strategy for success. There's always bound to be other challenges that get in the way. And as a startup, you don't want to get stuck in other challenges. You want to stay focused on what you set out to do.
And what are some of the challenges that you've had in getting to where you are now?
Oh, so many, so many. I think for startups, especially in the UK, but I imagine not just UK, anywhere in the world, financing is a constant challenge. We have been blessed in terms of investment, but also I started with an initial pool, so I didn't have to go out before I started to look for money to start an idea. But I think, yeah, getting an idea off the ground. I was thinking, in 6 months we'll have something ready. It took us a year and a half. So the runway was too long. And also I feel like, money and time.
And what is your main sort of challenge that you see going forward now? Still money and time?
Well, I think it's bandwidth as well. Especially for us, we've had to literally change direction as a business in less than a week with the COVID crisis coming on. And we have been very flexible, agile, and nimble with that. We've recontracted with a lot of our staff. For me, it was very important to keep the core team so that we could keep going and reinvest all our time, effort, and energy in business development and product development rather than go out and pursue clients, because that wasn't going to happen in this situation. And we reconnected back with our purpose. Why do we exist? We exist because we want to make philanthropy transparent, and we want to make philanthropy coordinated. And this is the time when people are going to give. This is the time when we are needed more than ever before. And that has fueled us with more passion. We've actually made 3 additional hires in April to help us with this next round of outreach, because this is the time. If we cannot be of help now, we shouldn't exist as a company. That's what I believe in. And I feel with what we have and what we are doing and what we will do, we will actually show that this is a time for coordination. This is a time for breaking down organizational boundaries when it comes to giving. And we are, I won't say names yet, but in the next week we'll be announcing some partnerships with some of the largest foundations in the UK who are going to share their data publicly, to share what they have funded, so that we know what remains to be funded. And I feel like for Maanch, this has been an amazing opportunity to connect with organizations which would have connected with us maybe a year from now, because we'd have a very slow growth process, traction, and then sort of bigger doors open. Whereas now we're able to knock on some of the biggest doors, and they're opening. So.
Amazing. One of the things that I thought about a lot, and you mentioned it at the start, is what your purpose in life is, what my personal purpose in life is. And I'm sure a lot of people think about it. I mean, there's a quote, I think it's by Shakespeare, the purpose of life is to find your gift, and the meaning of life is to give it away. And your organization obviously embodies that. But for someone who, say, is busy with a family and is busy trying to make a successful career for themselves, what would you say is the most impactful way to be able to give back to society without, say, just having to give £50 every time Children in Need comes around on the TV and you dial in or you text in?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal thing, purpose. I also think purpose is an evolutionary thing. What I considered to be my purpose few years ago has evolved as I have grown as well. So I think I can't make a specific comment like do this, but what I can or give here or use this platform. But I would say for anyone and everyone, I think the key question is to stay alive to what does living meaningfully and purposefully right now mean to me. And whatever is that answer that comes up, to just give effect to that, and allocating time once a week or once a month to just have that reflective moment and keeping that connection with the inner self, because it's very easy to just go with the flow and not have that moment to connect with what is the inner desire that is still unfulfilled. And I think many of us, we may have everything in our life, still experience there is something that's not fulfilled. And I think engaging with that question is the first step towards a more fulfilling life.
And do you feel that starting this project is helping you to get there?
100%. I feel like I don't mind. I have like so much intelligence, and not intelligence, but like so much like neural firings of ideas that are happening. And I feel like I need to give effect to them now. I'm like, my mind is running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm frustrated by the speed of execution, which is more like 20 or 30 miles an hour. Yeah, I feel like at the moment I'm sleeping on 3-4 hours a day. It's incredible, but I feel so much energy. I feel like this is the time where we actually have an opportunity to do something that previously was not possible, and this is a unique gateway.
And
so
I
yeah,
think,
I feel.
and I definitely think that using technology is an amazing way to do this, and a way that people can almost do, like you said, from their bedrooms, to be able to see the impacts of the good that they're doing somewhere else on the other side of the world. And I read that you're using blockchain technology to help you enable this. For people who don't understand blockchain, I mean, are you able to explain it in a simple way, and how you're using that technology to make this happen?
Yes, thank you. So just to clarify, I started the idea with blockchain for philanthropy.
Right.
I studied at Oxford and I put my paper out, which was on blockchain for philanthropy. In terms of execution, I realized that blockchain is still a evolving technology itself, and it requires a massive network for it to really work, and for the investment to be worthwhile. And so we have built the architecture of the technology that we have built is still built on a central system, but we are able to put it on a blockchain because of the way we've designed it, and make it accessible and decentralized to everyone as soon as we are ready. What I would say for people who don't know anything about blockchain is it's just a word. The idea is that if I am Darshita Gillies, and I am born in India, and I'm a British citizen, and this identity of me is required by a bank, and required by to open a bank account, is required by a business to employ me, is required by a utilities company to give access to utilities to my apartment. So this is one set of data that we know is common and required. The way we are engaging right now is this data I have, and I give here, and I give there, and I give there. If there was a way in which I could have the data here, and I could say, if anyone wants my ID data for banking, this, they can just go here. And this is a single point of truth about that data. As I get a new passport, it gets updated. This point, then it minimizes cost of coordination and validation for the whole network. It means that a bank doesn't need to use a third-party provider to check if this is the right person. It doesn't require someone in a bank to go through a verification process and employ a whole lot of machinery to check that I'm a valid person. So in a nutshell, it's really a data point that can be accessed by multiple parties who agree that that is the reference point for that data, and that is true.
And the key point is securely as well, and that data is secure,
and it cannot be changed, it cannot be tampered. It's what is. It has many risks associated with it, and which is one of the primary reasons why the technology hasn't taken off. But there are a lot of working groups that are working on minimizing those risks and making it accessible. In a charity space, how it would work would simply be a charity doesn't need to go through multiple due diligence process with multiple organizations. Once you know a charity is registered, it's got good governance in place, and it's got a registered bank account, that data can be accessible and made available to pretty much anyone who wants to fund that charity. It's not, all organizations don't need to spend so much time in verifying an organization. So
amazing.
how you make life simple.
Amazing. And I've only got a few more questions. I'm conscious of your time. As you said, you've only been getting 2-3 hours of sleep a night, so you might need an afternoon nap as well. You've done a lot of public speaking. You mentioned the UN, and you said earlier about a TED talk. You've done, I think, speaking at the Vatican as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you first of all develop the skill of public speaking and then get those gigs?
Yeah. Well, I would say I grew up very shy. I was born in a very conservative Indian household. I was told, like, women listen, men talk. It was very patriarchal household I was brought up in, and I was very very conscious, and I had a huge inferiority complex as well. I never felt confident about what I was thinking and whether it would be appropriate. I grew up very, very shy and in a very conservative Indian house where I was told that, girls speak, men talk. Also, don't speak loudly with elders. So I feel a lot of social limitations I had to overcome in just sort of coming through, getting my own voice and knowing what that voice is and why should I use my voice has been a big question. I still remember after I quit the bank, I started my journey as a coach trainer. I've coached over 500 coaches to become coaches. And part of that training was to go in front of a training room and teach people about how to coach. And for me, those were the most incredible learning days where I really pushed myself. And before I even started the coach training, I had to enroll coaches to come to the training to learn. And I went to a university in Mumbai, and I asked them if I might present to their students because this might be a good career alternative for them. And they said, "Oh yes, we can bring about 600 students in the auditorium." And I didn't expect that kind of positive response. And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I still remember standing on the stage there with my knees shaking and thinking, why did I put myself in this spot? Because I have never spoken in front of a crowd. So I feel part of me is a risk taker. I learned to dive before I learned to swim. So I feel like I just go out and do stuff, and I figure out how to do it when I put myself out. And in terms of, even when I look back sometimes at my TED Talk at St. Andrews, which was in 2015, the first time I looked, I have a very critical mind, and I said, "Oh, that doesn't work. Like, I wouldn't put it out at all." And then the next time I played it on mute, and I just watched myself. And I looked at myself through the eyes of my parents. My parents don't speak English. My parents would never have imagined the life I live, and that they would have created that as a possibility for me. And so when I looked at myself through the eyes of my parents, I was in tears, and I felt so much joy and so much pride for myself. And I feel that, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. And now I'm not scared of making mistakes, which allows me to just go out and have fun.
I'm sure your parents would be very proud as well. So how did you get those gigs at the Vatican and TED Talks?
Yeah, I feel what I started with was I put myself out as someone who's really passionate about sustainability and about collaboration. And with all the skill sets I have, these are areas where I can really bring value. The opportunity for TED Talk came because they were obviously looking for someone who was young and who would speak to students in the way that students would be inspired. So that was an amazing opportunity, and that led me to a lot of other gigs. And as I put myself out, it was when Pope Francis announced the Laudato Si, which is the planet as our common home. They also put a small committee together to look at how do we language a religious sort of mandate and land it with businesses and land it with governments. And they put a small working group together. So I was invited to be part of that working group, which looked at how do we bring some of this work into the world of business, into the world of governments. The same with the United Nations. I looked at data from the UN Statistics Division, and I created a map, an interactive map that would show all the countries where they were with their progress and what they could do to make a difference. And by just sharing with the teams at the UN that this is what I've done, what's the best place for me to share this, then created the opportunity for me to have an audience that would for whom this would be relevant.
And is it
the same continues.
And is it something that you see doing a lot more of in the future?
For me, at this point in time, almost 100% of my time is Maanch. I do also sit on the boards of a couple organizations. I do public speaking, but I only do it where I really feel I can add value.
So you've learned to say no to a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think that's an important habit that a lot of people, especially as you become more successful, saying no is actually a good skill to have, and also learning how to say no as well.
Yeah.
How do you decide what opportunities you would take up and that you wouldn't take up, so that it doesn't divert you away from where you want to go to?
Yeah, I always ask myself the question, who's the audience and why would they want to hear me? And will they change their action or behavior or make a different decision if they hear me speak? Then I know I need to be speaking there. Otherwise, no. Thank you.
And what action would you like people to take from listening to you on this podcast?
I would like people to be more reflective and more purposeful in their actions. That's what I feel people need to be doing.
And how do you see the world changing after we get past COVID-19? Have you had time to reflect on that?
We will only do this if we are together. We will be able to do this if we stay together. Media and other forces are going to disengage us, tell us stories that are not going to necessarily resonate, and we'll need to go back to our heart and ask, how can I connect with people now? In the end, everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to live a meaningful life, make a difference. No one wants to just sit at home and watch television all day. Maybe there are some people, but I think in the end, once we are past with a whole lot of Netflix for 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks, we'll go, okay, but now what next? And I think everyone wants to do something that's meaningful. And I think if we can create a society around meaning and value each other, that's the kind of society that's possible from here.
And finally, any other final thoughts? That was a nice way to sort of end what we've spoken about today. But anything else that you would like to say?
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing as well. I feel like voices and thoughts can influence others, and the fact that you're gathering thoughts and voices and putting them out is a great service to people in this time. So I want to acknowledge you for what you're doing.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for your time today. And just quickly, where can people find out more about you?
Maanch.com, MAANCH.com.
Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes, and I'll put everything else along with it as well. Thank you so much for your time, and
Thank you.
I hope to catch up with you soon. Thank you.
Likewise. Bye. Okay, all the best.
Thank you for listening and watching. If you've got any suggestions or any feedback, then feel free to get me on Twitter at GurmejSP or Insta at events_Gurmej, spelled Gurmej. Thank you for listening. Catch you soon.